Hi, and welcome to the Fighting Words Northern Ireland podcast, where we interview members of our teen writers group, Write Club, to find out about their writing inspiration, their top tips, and to hear some of their work. Write Club is open to all teens in Northern Ireland who like to write or would like to give it a go. We meet online and in person, and we welcome all story writers, poetry writers, playwrights, or any other kind of writing you can think of. We're a free drop-in club where you'll get support and feedback from the club mentors and members if you would like to share your work. I'm McCaughrain. I write novels for teenagers, and I'm a Write Club mentor. And today on the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing Ishaan, who is 14 and is a keen writer and has a very creepy story to share with us today. Hi, Ishaan. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, thank you.
I'd love to start by hearing about the kind of thing you like to write, Ishaan. What's your favorite genre?
My favorite genre to read and write is the adventure, sci-fi, fantasy. Yeah, these three genres are my favorite.
Brilliant. Is that the kind of thing you like to read? Is that what inspired you to write those kinds of stories?
Kind of, yeah.
Great. And do you have a project that you're working on at the moment? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. The story I'm working on right now is also the piece I'm going to write. So I'm currently working on Arduous Descent. It's a horror book, and it's about a group of teenagers. They embark on a hike on a hill, only to find out it's haunted, and it's up to Tim to save his friends once they're abducted, I would say, by the spirits.
Fantastic. That sounds really exciting. And have you always written, Ishaan, since you were very young?
I started writing when I was 9, or since I was 8. But I always like to read. I started reading when I was 3. So I've always been a keen reader.
Do you think that's what inspired you to want to write your own stories?
Yeah, I would say so.
Brilliant. And you've just joined us at Write Club quite recently, Ishaan. It's been great to have you there. What do you enjoy most about being in a writing group with other writers?
So I joined Write Club so that I could meet other writers of my age and hear out their stories. And I also liked how the authors, the Q&As with the authors, the famous authors, come in every month, and I get to experience their opinions and their experiences as a writer. And I grow as a writer.
Yeah, do you think it's influenced how you write, listening to professional writers talk about their writing?
Yeah, it's cleared out a bunch of my issues.
That's great to have someone that you can ask about stuff that you get stuck with. That's fantastic. I'm going to ask you now if you would read us some of your work, and then we'll talk a bit more about how you approach writing. I feel like I should warn our listeners to get behind the sofa for this one because it's pretty scary. So if you want to go ahead, Ishaan, and introduce your chapter and read it to us.
Chapter 3, Not What They Seem. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Leaves under my feet bristled and crunched, step by step. Hoot, hoot. An owl hooted ominously. Grasshoppers and crickets played their songs in the trees. Steady progression down the path. Left, right, left, right. 1 foot after the other. Brandishing my phone's flashlight in front of me. I was ready to blind whoever or whatever approached me, whether that be a dandy dog or a deceptive demon. My gold watch gleamed in the soft moonlight, prepared to drive away the spirits that wandered about, 1 foot after the other. Suddenly, I spotted a human-like figure in the trees. "Daniel, is that you?" It called out in a familiar voice. "Tom, is that you too?" I asked, unsure of the idea to approach it. "Daniel, do not bother leaving," it stated in a deadpan voice. "The hill is everything. The hill calls out to us. It wants us, needs us. Our flesh, our blood, our bones." The figure's head tilted and glitched repeatedly from side to side. "Tom?" I asked, starting to panic. "Join me, Daniel. You belong to us. You belong to the hill. Remember me, Daniel? And the rest of our friends? We're all here. Come, Daniel. Join us." That was not Tom. It broke out of the trees and rushed towards me. A hunking mess, 8 feet tall. It was as big as a large bear. Its head spun around 180 degrees with a sickening crack, revealing a grey face with empty black eyes, having grey and red pinpoints for pupils. Blood, muck, and coal bits streaked down its hollow cheeks. Its fangs dripped with saliva, and even the saliva was black. I reacted quickly and flashed my watch at the non-Tom figure. The beast stopped dead, pun intended, in its tracks and unhinged its jaw widely, letting loose a deafening screech. It scampered away on all fours, twisting its body in stomach-churning ways, vanishing into the faraway bushes. I breathed out puffs of relief. The gold watch had served its purpose in driving away the hideous spirit, giving me some berth against the inhabitants of the hill. Well, best be moving. I continued downwards. The trees rustled in the wind. Suddenly, I spotted a red backpack in the corner of my eye. A backpack belonging to Dave, one of my friends. I sprinted over to it. With horror, I realized it wasn't red. It wasn't red at all. It was an open black backpack, filled to the brim with coal and blood. It positively dripped with blood. Gallons of it. I gasped and sputtered in shock. On it was written in ugly, bold letters, "Join us." I stumbled away. A black vignette formed around my eyes. Whispers echoed all around me as I clutched my head in pain and fright. Make them stop, I thought, through gritted teeth. Join us, you belong, you're ours, no escape. Suddenly, everything stopped. I risked a peek of my surroundings. Join us. Its breath was warm on my neck. I bellowed in panic and swung my wrist behind me. My gold watch shone brightly, but nothing was behind me. Gripped with fright, I ran down the path, looking all around me. I had entered the mansion of madness. Insanity was my host.
Ishaan, that was fantastic. Thank you. You're so good at creating a tense atmosphere. I love that description of not Tom. It was so creepy. Was that really fun to write? Do you enjoy scaring your readers?
Yeah, I found it really interesting to write since I usually don't write the horror genre. So yeah, I found it interesting to, describe how scary it was.
So you're experimenting with something new for this story with horror?
Yeah, I am.
Brilliant. And what was your inspiration for the story? Where did it come from?
So a few months ago, I was on a hike with my family on a small hill back in India. And we went in the evening. But as we returned, it was extremely dark. And we basically couldn't see anything. We had to use our phones to see in front of us even. And it was as eerie and as frightening as it was in my book. So yeah, I got the inspiration from there.
So you decided to turn that into a horror story. That's such a great idea. Fiction can be made out of absolutely anything, just a walk home. Isn't that fantastic? Do you ever get stuck when you're writing? And if so, how do you get going again? What would be your top tip for someone who was feeling a bit stuck?
I find it tricky and annoying how many times the writer's block comes up when I write. Writer's block never lets me progress. And as for dealing with it, I don't. I'm still figuring out how to deal with writer's block. But as a tip, I would say that you shouldn't exactly be stuck in the part you're writing. Maybe you should try something new, like start writing a different thing, and maybe you'll get inspiration for writing the part where you're stuck at in your main book.
I think that's great advice, Ishaan. Just give it a bit of time and work on something else. I think your brain is always working on your stories in the background, even when you're not aware of it. So that's a good idea. So professional writers will write their first draft and then they go back and edit it. So they'll go and make loads of changes to polish the writing. Do you do that? Do you do a lot of editing after you've written something, and do you enjoy it?
I do. After I finished writing a draft, I usually type it down in the laptop so it becomes easier for editing. And once I start editing, I also discover lots of mistakes and maybe additions that I can add, like to the book itself to make it even more better than the draft.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And do you enjoy having people read your work? Does that inspire you to write more?
It does. So I really relish the fact that my readers are interested, if they're interested in my books. And yeah, I really enjoy that someone is finding it curious, like someone is curious about it.
Mm-hmm. And what are your writing dreams, Ishaan? Do you see yourself as a writer in the future?
I don't see it as my main career, but who knows? Maybe I do become an author. I I hope I write like really, really long books, like the ones I read right now. I hope I write thick, fat books. Like I have enough to write such big books. I dream myself doing that.
And people write for so many different reasons. Not everybody wants to be a professional writer. They might just write because they love it. So why do you write, Ishaan? Why is writing important to you?
So since I've always enjoyed reading, I thought to myself, why not write myself? Why not write a book myself too? So yeah, I started writing short stories at first, and then I realized that yeah, I enjoy it. So I started writing. I started writing actual stories, and yes, I really enjoy writing. It's more of a hobby.
Yeah, so it just makes you happy.
Yeah,
That's fantastic. Do you plan your stories out in advance or do you make it up as you go along? What works for you?
I do a bit of both. So I before writing a book, I mostly plot out everything except perhaps the ending. And then I make up extra additions and advancements on the way. So just like the skeleton of it, I do before and I add the flesh and bones afterwards.
That's great. And it's a great idea to leave the ending. It's kind of like leaving yourself a little treat that you haven't planned out yet.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So what would be your top tip for a young person who maybe wants to write but isn't sure where to start?
It's okay if you're not sure where to start. Writing down what's on your mind, it really helps. Like if you have a plan to write a story based on it. And if you don't have a story, that's okay too. You should write something small at first, like if you're uncertain, like short poems, short stories, etc.
Do you ever write poems or plays or anything, or do you prefer to write stories?
I write poems sometimes. I like limericks. They're like 5 line poems.
That's a great idea. And if you're stuck, a little limerick would be quite quick. You could do that and maybe get yourself going again. That's a good idea. So the best writers are also readers. So my final question is, can you recommend a great book for our listeners? What are the books that have inspired you to write?
One of my favorite book series is like a fantasy book series called Keeper of the Lost Cities. It's a really interesting book about the secret world of elves and dwarves and goblins and how the elves have different magical abilities and how they use them.
Do you enjoy books with that kind of elaborate world building
I do, yeah.
that inspired you to write sci-fi and horror because you have to create those worlds yourself?
Yeah, I've always enjoyed fiction more than non-fiction.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Ishaan. It's been fascinating to talk to you, and I'm sure our listeners have really enjoyed your reading, although you've probably traumatized them all with your scary story. We loved hearing about how you write, so thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
And thank you everyone for listening. If you are a teen writer in Northern Ireland and you'd like to join a friendly and supportive writing group, then check out the Fighting Words Northern Ireland website. You'd be very welcome.